Today to move third reading of Bill 7, the Electoral Boundaries Commission Amendment Act 2016. The proposed amendments in Bill 7 would authorize the early appointment of an Electoral Boundaries Commission on or before October 31st, 2016, which is earlier than currently allowed under the Act, and clarify a Commission's authority to consider recent information respecting population that is not collected on a province-wide basis, such as municipal population information. This information would be used along with the federal decennial census of population or a more recent province-wide census. As mentioned, the first proposed amendment would allow the early appointment of the Electoral Boundaries Commission. The Act's timeline for appointment of a commission are based on the assumption that general elections are held about once every 4 years. Unfortunately, due to the previous government's early election call, this timeline has been somewhat thrown off because the election occurred a year earlier than anticipated. The current wording of the Act provides that a commission is to be appointed during the first session of the legislature following every second general election after the appointment of the last commission. However, if fewer than 8 years have passed since the appointment of the last commission, the following commission is to be appointed no sooner than 8 years after that. A commission was last appointed in July of 2009, and there have been 2 general elections since then. However, the earliest a commission can be appointed is 8 years after that date. As such, under the current wording of the Act, a commission cannot be appointed earlier than July of 2017. A commission needs to be appointed before July of 2017 so that there's sufficient time for the commission to complete its work. The early appointment, Mr. Speaker, will also ensure that there is sufficient time for election preparations, such as preparing lists of electors under the new electoral boundaries and providing these lists to registered political parties for their use during the election campaign. It's anticipated that the next general election will be held between March 1st and May 31st of 2019, as per the fixed election period set out in the Elections Act. The Chief Electoral Officer recommends that the Commission be appointed in the fall of 2016. I will now explain why it's important to proceed with authorizing the early appointment of the Commission from a legal perspective. The Charter of Rights includes a guarantee of effective representation. Alberta currently has 87 electoral districts. The Act says that the population of a proposed electoral division should be no more than 25% above or below the average population in the proposed electoral district. There is an exception for 4 special electoral divisions, which can have a population of up to 50% below the average population of all proposed electoral divisions if they meet certain criteria. The 25% deviation from the average population is intended to be rare and not the norm. The early appointment of a commission will give it time to consider the population of the electoral divisions and to protect that right. Mr. Speaker, I think it's important to make clear that this is simply a procedural change necessitated by the early election call. The second proposed amendment would clarify a current section in the Act dealing with the information the Commission must and may use when determining the population of Alberta. The Act says that the Commission must use population information from the federal census carried out every 10 years. However, if there is a more recent province-wide census, the Commission may use that population information. The Act also currently allows the Commission to use other more recent population information in conjunction with the federal decennial census and the population or a more recent province-wide census. The proposed amendment clarifies the authority to use data collected municipally, but this does not represent a change in policy, Mr. Speaker. The last Electoral Boundaries Commission used municipal census data and found it very helpful in their determination. Finally, there was one amendment proposed regarding this aspect of Bill 7 during Committee of the Whole. That amendment was defeated. The defeating of that amendment, Mr. Speaker, was with the support of the Chief Electoral Officer, The amendment would disproportionately prejudice the representational rights of Albertans in rapidly growing areas of the province by not including population increases in this area that have occurred since 2011. Mr. Speaker, this bill is important to protecting Albertans' rights to effective representation, and I ask for the support of all members for these important amendments. Thank you.